So, how does the worst economic disaster in modern history kick off? Well, believe it or not, it starts with a party. We're talking about the Great Depression, a crisis so big it didn't just break banks, it literally redrew the map of the world. Let's dive right in.
Okay, before we get lost in all the numbers and the big picture economics, I want you to just picture this for a second. We're in America, the richest country on earth at the time, and people are standing in line for hours. Not for a new gadget, but for a free cup of coffee and a donut. That was the reality for millions. It's so important to remember that behind all the stats we're about to cover, there are real human stories of lives just completely upended.
All right, so to really get our heads around this whole thing, we're going to break it down into 6 parts. We'll kick things off with a party, the Roaring Twenties, then watch it all come crashing down. We'll follow the chaos as it spreads worldwide, look at the real human impact, see how they finally climbed out of it, and then, what kind of world was left standing at the end. So here's the crazy part. Our story doesn't start with a bust. Nope, it starts with an incredible boom. The biggest economic disaster ever actually grew out of one of the wildest periods of wealth America had ever known. And it all got started, funnily enough, by World War I. Just look at these numbers. They tell you everything you need to know. While Europe was tearing itself apart in World War I, its factories went dark. And who stepped in? America. U.S. factories were humming, churning out everything from food to weapons. Exports more than doubled in just 4 years. America basically became the world's factory and its bank. The economy just went through the roof. And all that money from the war, it lit the fuse for the Roaring Twenties. Jazz, flappers, the whole scene. Suddenly, regular families could buy things they'd only dreamed of. Cars, radios, refrigerators. And what was the magic trick that made it all possible? Easy credit. Buy now, pay later became the new mantra. It was a massive nationwide shopping spree, all built on borrowed money. You can probably see where this is going. Well, every party has a morning after, right? And this one was a doozy. The Roaring Twenties looked amazing on the surface, but underneath, it was all built on a shaky foundation of debt. And in 1929, boom, the music just stopped, the lights went out, and the whole world was left in the dark. The thing is, some people saw this coming. It wasn't a total shock. Check out this quote from Paul Warburg way back in March of '29. He's basically screaming that Wall Street has turned into a gambling den and that something terrible is bound to happen. But nobody was listening. The money was rolling in, the party was in full swing, and nobody wanted to hear the bad news. And then it happened. It started with a little shudder on October 22nd. But just 2 days later, Black Thursday, the bottom fell out. Pure panic. The next week, on Black Tuesday, the whole thing just imploded. We're talking about $14 billion gone. Poof! In a single day. To put that in perspective, that's like hundreds of billions of dollars today. Fortunes that took lifetimes to build were wiped out between breakfast and dinner. But this wasn't just a Wall Street problem. Oh no, this was like a financial supervirus. And in a world that was more connected than ever, it spread. Fast. It wasn't a question of if it would go global, but just how quickly it would infect everyone. It's easiest to think of it like a set of dominoes. The first one to fall? The U.S. stock market. Bam. That knocked over the next one. American banks. They panicked and started calling in all the loans they'd made to countries in Europe. Then, another domino. America put up huge trade walls, trying to protect its own economy, but that just froze up global trade. The financial sickness leaped across the ocean to Europe. And you know what follows economic chaos? Yeah, political chaos. And the damage wasn't just general, it was devastatingly specific. In Austria, one single bank fails, and it triggers a panic across the entire continent. In Germany, 6 million people are out of work. That desperation paves the way for the Nazi Party. Britain gets knocked off the gold standard, its currency tanks. And this reached everywhere, even India, where the price of wheat collapsed, absolutely crushing farmers. Literally, no one was safe. Okay, so we've talked about the big picture. The banks, the governments. But what did this actually feel like for regular people? Because this wasn't some abstract headline in a newspaper. For millions, this was about whether or not you could feed your family. It was a daily, grinding fight just to survive. Just let this number sink in for a second. 25%. By 1933, 1 out of every 4 people who wanted a job couldn't find one. 1 in 4. Think about that. That's not just a number, that's a society on the brink of collapse. It means millions of families with no money, no savings, and absolutely no hope for the future. So what happens when you lose your home? People ended up in these sprawling shanty towns, built out of whatever they could find: scrap wood, cardboard, old metal. And they had a name for them: Hoovervilles. It was a direct, sarcastic slap in the face to President Hoover, the man everyone blamed for the mess. These places became the symbol of just how far the country had fallen. And the hits just kept on coming. It was relentless. Manufacturing, it fell by almost half. Construction projects, down by a staggering 80%. And the banks, over 11,000 of them went under, taking people's life savings with them. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, nature itself seemed to turn on them. The Dust Bowl turned fertile farmland into desert, forcing a massive migration of desperate families. The only reliable place to get a meal? A soup kitchen line. So, how do you climb out of a hole that deep? Well, the recovery was slow, and it started with a new leader, with a radical new plan. And it ended, tragically, with the start of another global war. This next chapter is all about the New Deal, a period of massive change, and for the first time in a long time, a little bit of hope. When Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR, came into office in '33, he promised the country a New Deal. And look, this wasn't just a catchy slogan. This was a complete rethinking of what government should do. For the very first time, the federal government stepped in a huge way, creating jobs, putting rules on the banks, and creating a social safety net. Now, it wasn't a magic wand. It didn't fix everything, but man, did it restore hope, and it got millions of people working again. Here's the really dark irony of this whole story, though. The thing that finally killed the Great Depression for good: another world war. World War II created this unbelievable demand for war materials: tanks, planes, ships, you name it. America's factories, which had been sitting silent for a decade, roared back to life. The government just flooded the economy with money to build the war machine, and that, in a grim twist, is what finally brought back full employment and ended the Depression. So when the war was finally over, the world that was left was completely different. It was like a global reset button had been hit. The old order was gone. In its place, you had new superpowers, new battles of ideas, and a whole new set of rules for how the world was going to work. Think about the fallout. That economic pain of the '30s? It directly led to the rise of extremists like Hitler in Germany and a military government in Japan. It was the fertile soil for World War II. And after that war, the US was left standing as the global superpower. It then poured billions into rebuilding Europe with the Marshall Plan, partly to create new markets, but also to stop the spread of communism. Just like that, the world was redrawn. So you see, the Great Depression was so much more than a stock market crash. It was a brutal, decade-long test that completely changed everything. It showed us just how dangerous financial bubbles can be, how fragile our global economy is, and how powerful government action can be. And that leaves us with a pretty big question today, doesn't it? In our own hyper-connected, fast-moving world, have we actually learned from all this?